7 people sit beneath a model of the Space Shuttle Challenger. Their blue flight suits are almost identical, but a small red apple appears beside one name on the mission patch. It belongs to Krista McAuliffe, a New Hampshire teacher chosen to bring an ordinary classroom into orbit. Around her are 6 astronauts whose work had taken years of training. The official portrait promises competence, confidence, and a future already scheduled. On January 28, 1986, millions watched that promise rise from Florida. 73 seconds later, Challenger disappeared inside a branching cloud. The photograph remained, 7 faces held together after the mission itself had broken apart. What did this carefully arranged portrait conceal about the machine behind them, the warnings before launch, and the decisions that allowed a known weakness to meet the coldest morning of the shuttle program? NASA made the crew portrait in November 1985 at Johnson Space Center. Commander Francis Dick Scobie and pilot Michael Smith sit near the center. Mission specialists Ellison Onizuka, Judith Resnick, and Ronald McNair join payload specialist Gregory Jarvis and teacher Krista McAuliffe. Each person looks directly toward the camera. No helmet or spacecraft interrupts the view. The picture was designed to identify a crew, not investigate a system. It records names, uniforms, and institutional confidence, not the thousands of components in Challenger, the contractor meetings surrounding its solid rocket boosters, or the engineering data accumulating since earlier flights. NASA's archive also preserves less formal images, Smith and McNair talking during training, Resnick at her desk, McAuliffe floating aboard an aircraft during a weightlessness exercise. These photographs return motion and work to people flattened by the later disaster. They remind us that the crew existed before becoming a single memorial image. The official portrait acquired its final meaning afterward. Viewers now search the faces for knowledge that was not there. A smile becomes ominous only because we know the next scene. To understand the photograph honestly, we must resist pretending the crew could see the chain of decisions hidden outside its frame. The shuttle had been sold as a reusable spacecraft that would make access to orbit more routine. Challenger first flew in 1983 and completed 9 successful missions before its 51L. Success encouraged an ambitious schedule. NASA planned to launch frequently, carry scientific payloads, deploy satellites, support military missions, and demonstrate that spaceflight could include people beyond the astronaut corps. The Teacher in Space project made that promise visible. More than 11,000 teachers applied. McAuliffe, who taught social studies at Concord High School, was selected as the primary participant, with Barbara Morgan as backup. In orbit, McAuliffe planned lessons about life aboard the shuttle. Schools across the United States prepared to watch. The mission also had demanding technical goals, deploying a tracking and data relay satellite, observing Halley's Comet, and running experiments in fluids, materials, and education. Yet public attention centered on the teacher whose profession connected the launch to nearly every town. Beneath Challenger, 2 solid rocket boosters provided most of the thrust at liftoff, assembled from cylindrical segments joined in the field. Rubber O-rings inside each joint were meant to seal hot combustion gases. Engineers had observed erosion and blow-by on previous flights. The joint could move as pressure rose, and the primary O-ring needed to respond quickly enough to maintain the seal. The problem was known, debated, and incompletely resolved. NASA and booster contractor Morton Thiokol continued flying while studying modifications. Previous missions had returned safely, which made the evidence easy to interpret as manageable. A damaged seal that hadn't caused catastrophe became proof both of danger and, paradoxically, of apparent resilience. Since 51L was delayed several times. On January 27, Forecasts predicted unusually cold temperatures at Kennedy Space Center. Ice formed on the launch structure. Rubber becomes less flexible in cold conditions, but there was little flight data for O-ring performance at the temperatures expected on launch morning. During a teleconference, Thiokol engineers argued against launching below the coldest previous booster joint experience. Engineer Roger Boisioli had warned months earlier that joint failure could produce a catastrophe, and he and colleagues raised the danger again the evening before launch. Managers asked for evidence and challenged the recommendation. Thiokol's initial position was not to launch below 53 degrees Fahrenheit. After an internal caucus, company management reversed that recommendation and approved launch. The paperwork passed through a system in which engineering uncertainty had to compete with schedule pressure, institutional expectations, and the absence of any previous fatal failure. The crew portrait shows none of this. The people who would bear the consequence were not participants in the critical contractor discussion. The photograph joined 7 individuals visually, while the launch decision was scattered among rooms, phone lines, charts, and levels of authority. On the morning of January 28, ICE teams inspected the pad. Launch occurred at 11:38 a.m. Eastern Time. Cameras positioned around Complex 39B recorded Challenger's ascent from multiple angles footage that would later become evidence, frame by frame. At ignition, a puff of dark smoke appeared near a joint in the right solid rocket booster. Investigators concluded that cold-stiffened O-rings had not sealed properly. Aluminum oxides produced during ignition temporarily sealed the opening, and for a short time the joint appeared to hold. Challenger climbed through changing aerodynamic forces. Roughly 1 minute into flight, it passed through maximum dynamic pressure. Winds and vehicle motion disturbed the temporary seal. A flame emerged from the booster joint, grew, and impinged on nearby hardware, eventually compromising the external tank and the strut supporting the booster. At 73 seconds, the vehicle broke apart. The large white cloud seen on television was not a simple explosion. Structural breakup followed the failure of the external tank and the forces acting on the stack. The crew compartment separated and continued on a ballistic path before striking the ocean. Mission Control heard Michael Smith say "uh-oh" immediately before data ended. That brief transmission is part of the record, but it does not reveal what each crew member understood. Evidence later indicated some emergency air packs were activated. Investigators could not determine exactly when consciousness was lost. Responsible history stops at that uncertainty. Families, students, NASA employees, and television audiences experienced the event in real time. McAuliffe's presence meant many children were watching. Repeated broadcast images turned one sequence of vapor and falling debris into a permanent national memory. Photographs taken before launch changed at once. Images of the crew leaving their quarters or riding toward the pad became last photographs, though photographers had made them as routine mission coverage. Meaning moved backward through time, ordinary gestures became farewells without the subjects having intended them that way. Recovery teams searched the Atlantic. The crew's remains were recovered, examined, and returned to their families. Debris was mapped and analyzed. The physical evidence, launch photography, telemetry, testimony, and contractor records allowed investigators to reconstruct a failure that television alone could not explain. President Ronald Reagan appointed a commission chaired by former Secretary of State William Rogers. Its members included astronaut Neil Armstrong, physicist Richard Feynman, engineer Sally Ride, test pilot Chuck Yeager, and others. Public hearings exposed disagreements between technical knowledge and management decisions. Feynman's televised demonstration became one of the investigation's most remembered images. He placed a piece of O-ring material in ice water, compressed it, and showed it did not quickly recover its shape. The demonstration didn't replace the full engineering analysis, but it made one property understandable: cold rubber could fail to respond when the joint demanded movement. The Rogers Commission concluded that the immediate cause was failure of the pressure seal in the aft field joint of the right solid rocket booster. It also described serious problems in NASA's decision-making, communications, and safety organization. Information about O-ring erosion had not moved effectively to senior decision-makers, and launch constraints had gradually weakened. The phrase normalization of deviance, later associated with Challenger by sociologist Diane Vaughan, describes how repeated acceptance of unexpected performance can make danger appear normal. An O-ring showed damage, yet the shuttle returned, another mission flew, and the boundary of acceptable risk shifted. Success didn't eliminate the defect, it helped conceal its urgency. Engineers did not ignore every anomaly, and managers did not lack procedures. The joints were inspected, damage was documented, design changes were discussed. The failure lay partly in how that activity was interpreted. Because erosion varied and missions succeeded, the organization treated a condition never intended by the original design as something flight experience could bound. Data collected to expose danger became data used to justify continued operation. The Commission distinguished between the physical cause and the organizational setting that allowed it. Hardware behaves according to material conditions, but people decide which conditions are acceptable, which evidence is persuasive, and whether uncertainty delays a launch. A redesigned joint could address the seal. It could not alone repair the habits through which warnings lost force. Launch photography played a central role in the reconstruction. Cameras were placed to record engineering performance, not to create a public tragedy. Investigators synchronized film with telemetry and recovered debris, smoke at ignition, flame during ascent, the changing structure of the vehicle. All became measurable events. No single picture explains Challenger. The disaster becomes understandable only when photographs are placed beside engineering records and testimony. The 7 people in the portrait had distinct lives beyond their mission roles. Scobie had served as a combat aviator and test pilot. Smith was a naval aviator making his first spaceflight. Onizuka, born in Hawaii, had flown on Discovery. Resnick was an electrical engineer and the second American woman in space. McNair was a physicist, musician, and veteran astronaut. Jarvis was an engineer carrying fluid dynamics experiments. McAuliffe was a teacher whose lessons were meant to continue from orbit. Remembering those differences matters, because the Challenger 7 is useful shorthand but can erase separate work, families, humor, ambitions, and expertise. NASA's candid training photographs help reverse that compression, restoring time before the final morning. Barbara Morgan also complicates the ending. As McAuliffe's backup, she trained with the crew and watched the launch. She later became a professional astronaut and flew aboard Endeavour in 2007, not completing McAuliffe's lost mission, but carrying its educational purpose forward without pretending the original event could be repaired. After Challenger, NASA suspended shuttle flights for nearly 3 years. The solid rocket booster joints were redesigned, and management structures and safety procedures changed. Discovery returned the shuttle fleet to flight in September 1988. Yet institutional memory is not permanent. The loss of Columbia in 2003 again revealed how technical warnings, ambiguous evidence, and organizational assumptions could interact. Foam had struck the orbiter during launch. Because previous foam strikes hadn't destroyed a shuttle, the hazard had also become familiar. Challenger's lesson had been recorded, but recording a lesson does not guarantee obedience. The crew portrait therefore belongs to more than the history of one mechanical seal. It shows the human end of a technical system. Every launch decision joins engineering judgment to bodies seated inside a vehicle. Risk tables and conference calls eventually become physical conditions experienced by named people. The photograph's calm arrangement can mislead us if we treat it as prophecy, Nothing visible in the faces proves disaster was approaching. The warning existed elsewhere, in eroded O-rings, temperature data, engineering memos, and conversations that failed to stop the countdown. NASA continued to publish the portrait as a memorial, and it remains one of the agency's most recognizable crew images. 7 blue uniforms form a compact group, the mission insignia supplies identity, and the shuttle model turns institutional purpose into a clean background. The mission patch adds its own compressed history. 7 surnames circle Challenger, while McAuliffe's apple marks the teacher in space role, and Halley's comet represents an observation planned during flight. After the loss, these symbols became promises interrupted, but the patch also preserves the mission as its crew understood it before launch. A working expedition with experiments, satellite deployment, education, and return. Other images compete with it: Challenger's branching vapor cloud, Feynman's glass of ice water, the ice-coated launch pad, photographs of wreckage recovered from the ocean. Each answers a different question. The vapor cloud shows what the public witnessed. The ice water demonstration explains material behavior. The crew portrait shows who occupied the consequence. Online retellings often simplify the decision into villains knowingly sending astronauts to death. The record is more unsettling. Managers did receive warnings and approved launch despite unresolved concern, but the failure emerged from a culture that had learned to reinterpret damage as acceptable experience. Catastrophe did not require everyone to desire a reckless outcome. It required a system able to convert warning into permission. Return to the portrait. Return to the 7 faces beneath the shuttle model. The red apple beside McAuliffe's name still points toward a classroom that never occurred in orbit. The uniformity of the flight suits cannot erase the different people wearing them. What did the portrait conceal? Not a secret visible in their expressions. It concealed a chain of evidence outside the studio: damaged seals, cold weather uncertainty, a reversed recommendation, and an organization that mistook previous survival for future safety. 73 seconds made the photograph a memorial. The harder lesson lies in the months before it was taken and the hours before launch. Challenger was not lost because nobody knew enough to worry. It was lost because knowledge existed without gaining enough authority. The crew remained still in the official frame while the shuttle behind them appears ready to rise. Their photograph asks every technical institution the same question again. When evidence is incomplete but the possible cost has a human face, who is allowed to stop the countdown?